Okay, so we're back with part 3. Our MongoDB cluster should be created. So it now looks like this. So if we have any data in there, if we'd loaded the sample data and clicked on collections, we would see what collections are here. But we don't have any unless we chose that, unless you chose the load sample data option. So we basically just have an empty database. I'm going to go back there. Yes. So I'm going to go back. So I'm going to click connect. And there's 3 ways we can do it. We can do it through the shell, through our application. So we've built a mobile app and we want to connect it up. Or for now, if we just want to use Compass, I'm going to click that 3rd option, connect with Compass. And I'm going to click on the I have Compass because we already installed it. And all I really need to do is copy this line and then replace this placeholder in the angled brackets with the password I set up. So it's MongoDB plus the server username password at my cluster, and my database name by default is called test. I can create other databases. For now, I'll just keep it. So I'll copy that whole thing. And now in this connect to host, I can paste it in, and I'm just going to replace, I'm not too worried about my password, so I'm going to replace the word password and the angled brackets with the password I used when I created that user account. So whatever password you used, could go here. That's interesting. We may have to break this up a bit. Let's see. I may need to do this. Use the server name and database name, and I'm going to change my authentication to username and password. Put in the credentials here. Let's see if that makes a difference. So it's the server that starts here. I put in the username and password. We'll try this. Oh, okay. Didn't like the slash. MongoDB is not running. Let's see why.
Rich, could you please check network access? Security.
Sure. I did allow my IP. Yeah, it's that range. I'm going to say allow access from anywhere just to see. That makes a difference. So now the IP address shouldn't be an issue at all. I'm confused as to why this is not connecting. Yours worked? So you copied this. Click connect. That's not working very well for me. I'll restart it. If I have to use the command line, yeah, no kidding. Yes, I do. Now that you've closed on me, MongoDB. Well, I'd rather it's working for you than for me. I may wind up just using the command line. It's trying mine, but it's failing. Eventually, I'll get this to work. I'm going to try through the command line. Okay. So I've connected here. It says it's connected successfully. Actually, I can maybe use Compass and just connect to a different database I have. Do you have any sort of, I can't open my Compass right now. Do you have any sort of query window in Compass? Okay, click on, you should see a list of databases. There's a database there called test. I'm sort of flying blind here. If you see a database in Compass called test, click on it. I'm going to try and connect to my test database. So I'm going to try to insert some data. I have a database called test. I'm connected. I have no collections, no schema. So I'm going to go and try to insert some data. So I've run my use command. So I want to insert 2 documents. I'm going to create a collection called beers, and I'm going to insert 2 documents. Notice the schema is a little bit different. What's different about them? So I got 2 different insert commands here. Yeah, so in this second one, I have a 3rd key, and on sale, I don't have that value at all here. So in a relational database, this one might cause a problem if on sale is a required field. In a schema list database, that's okay. I can just leave it out. So I'll go to insert something. And I just set up a key and a value. So name. I'm going to come and look at yours again because I can't run mine. You should be able to do it somewhere in Compass. I'll come and look in a minute. So there's my simple insert. I don't need SQL. I just call db dot, the name of my collection, dot, and insert, and pass in a JSON object with keys and values. So it tells me one document was inserted. And now if I want to run a query, I can just run db.beers.find. So it automatically generates a unique identifier called _ID. And if I want to format this a little more nicely, I can use the MongoDB command .find.pretty. And then it will display it as a nested JSON object. Each key is on its own line. Yep, it is. It's a method call in the MongoDB documentation. So now I'm going to try and insert this second one, and then we'll try and figure out how we can do it through Compass. So now I'm going to insert a second one, but this time with a different schema. I'm just sort of following what's in my slide. So instead of 2 keys, just name and type, I've got name, type, and on sale. Thank you. So if my syntax is incorrect, it'll tell me. So it tells me it inserted. And now if I want to run the query again, I've got 2 objects, each one with a unique identifier. Right? Object ID. Right? So it's just stored as JSON. Okay, let's look through here if we've got any interface in here where we can insert the data. Or otherwise how we're going to do it through. I'm going to click on collections. Okay, we can actually do it right through here if Compass doesn't give us an interface. So I've created that test collection. I didn't build it in here. All I had to do was run a use command. If that database doesn't exist, it gets created automatically. And then I inserted my 2 documents through my command line, and here they are. So we actually should be able to do it in here. So if you create if you don't have a database, you can create it. If you see your test database, you can connect to it. And then we can create a collection. You can create your collection Call it beers. And once we've created the collection, we should be able to insert documents here. It won't be, we won't cap it. So that, yeah, then if we click insert, we don't even need the command, you just get a little JSON window. So we can populate this JSON object with any keys and any values that we want. Maybe you want to have a price in here. Maybe you want to have a country in here. Maybe you want to have a link to an image. You can create anything you like. So create a couple of documents in here. So the object ID is already here. So I can just use this little editor. I don't even need to write code. I can simply set up the keys and values. And insert my document. And now I've got 3. I can duplicate them. I can edit them. I can delete them. If I want to go in and edit, I can use so maybe I'll say not on sale anymore. I'll change true to false here and update my document. I think we can do this within Compass as well. You can do it online through their MongoDB portal, or you can do it on your local machine through Compass. We can also filter. So if this becomes a big list here, let's say I want the beers where type is ale. I can just create a little JSON object with a key and a value. And when I click find, actually, that's interesting. Why did it? Oh, because I have quotes in this. Yeah, you can edit them right here. So again, if I want to search for all the ales, right, it filters out that first one, which is a different type. So in our application code, obviously this is going to be the equivalent of writing a SQL where clause. I can reset and see everything. Oh. So these documents are pretty good. And the commands for manipulating the data in MongoDB are really simple. So if we want to insert a single document, Here's all our query operators. So we can use limit, we can use where clauses, where we could have as many conditions as we want, just keys and values. We can update one, we can do a replace, and delete one or many. So pretty simple to manipulate the data in this database. So this is going to be a really good option for us for mobile data. It addresses a lot of the things we talked about in terms of requirements. We have the option to put MongoDB locally, bundle it with our app, and store locally on a device. We can sync it to the Atlas cloud. It scales. It's fast, it's lightweight. We don't have to, we can change the schema easily. And we can connect to it through pretty much any kind of mobile app. Doesn't matter whether it's built with web technologies, whether we're building a native Android app with Java or Kotlin, or whether we're using Swift and building for iOS. This backend is going to work almost no matter what we're doing. It's not the only option. I know you guys have looked at Firebase a little bit already, but it's a good option. Unfortunately, they give us full access. So these subscriptions, they don't expire, right? As long as we stay in the sandbox, we can continue to use this for different things. Actually, this is kind of useful. They even have a little terminology map here. If you think of relational databases, here's their equivalent. So in databases, we have tables. MongoDB, we've got collections, rows and documents, etc. So this documentation is a good place to refer to. So a good experiment for you to try might be to see, how do I integrate this with, let's say, how would I integrate this into Android? How could I write a query and display this little list of beer documents that we've got in MongoDB? How could we render that inside of Android, right? What would we need to do to connect and be able to query and fetch that data so we could work with it? It'll be something worth trying. I don't know for time. See if there's anything else here I wanted to go over. Okay. All right, we're obviously not taking too deep of a dive into this, and I know, sorry, it did take a little bit of time to get this set up and running, and it didn't exactly run in the way I imagined, but we managed to get it running. So how many of you have been able to get some data into your database, put some documents in? All right, okay. Let's just start. Anyway, you need some help? Sure, okay. Yeah, so copy this. Yeah, okay, so go to command line. Okay, okay, click DIR, let's see what's in here. Here, okay. Yeah, okay. Paste that line in there again from Getter. Not change directory, but the line from Atlas. Go back there. Yeah, copy. Right click, and now put in space minus password. Space password. connecting them. So if you run the use test command, that connects you to the test database, and then you can try the inserts. The insert commands are in the PowerPoint slide, which I uploaded and I shared the link.
You can also do them through the interface.
Yeah, so you have two options to work with the database. You can use the interface where you're just working with their little JSON template, or if you connect through the shell, the commands that I used for inserting the data, they're actually right here, which is slide number 12 in the PowerPoint. Here were the two insert commands that I ran to insert from my command line. So we've got a little bit of time left. There is one other thing I just wanted to briefly do. I'm going to leave MongoDB. I said if you kind of got lost or got stuck, but you want to play around with it, you can always go back and watch part 3 of the video. Right? And you can catch up and do this at home if you got stuck. I did want to just revisit and play around with one other thing. We talked about at the beginning of class, we talked about a REST API, right? So we talked about scenarios where one application is exchanging data with another one, usually using JSON. And we had a quick look at, so I guess we sort of talked about this already. We talked about some of the use cases. Verifying a credit card, using a third-party sign-in, looking up a shipping rate. These would all be common app examples where we're working with an API. Okay, we're going to install one other tool. This tool is really helpful for working with APIs. So here's the tool I want you to download. The tool is called Postman, and you can get it from this URL. It runs on Windows, Linux, or OS X. So go and grab the Postman tool at getpostman.com. It's a free download. You don't have to register. Just follow that second link here, getpostman.com, and download and install Postman. It'll just take a minute. It's pretty quick. Maybe just give me some indicator when Postman is running. This is slide 19. I think it's actually the last slide in the deck. Once you've installed it, open up Postman, and there'll be a little kind of splash or tip screen you can close. What Postman allows us to do is to test out. We talked about consuming APIs. It allows us to test making calls to APIs. Yeah, so we see what do we send in and what do we get back from that API. So once you've loaded it, I think you just have to click on New Request. That will give you this screen. This screen may not load right away. So you just click on the new, there's a big orange button at the top left that says New, and click on New Request. And we don't need to save it. So just click Cancel. It just gives you this screen. It should be under Downloads. So go to, sorry, I'll pull it up. I'll show you where the download link is. Sorry about that. I thought they made it clear, but they didn't. Okay. So if you just go to product and Postman, it takes you to, yeah, so download the app. And then it should recognize your operating system. So it prompts me for Windows, but if it doesn't have the right one, here's OS X and here's 32-bit Linux, 64-bit Linux. So just get the right version for your operating system. So the other link I'm going to open up here, there's one more link. This is a mock API for testing, but it has the full structure of most REST APIs. So if you open up this link, this JSON placeholder, it'll take you here. So it's a fake API for doing testing with. So I want to see how my app would integrate with an API. I want to explore the methods in there and try calling them and consuming some of that data. Maybe I'm retrieving data, or maybe I'm sending data and getting responses back. So it's a REST API, and here's what it offers. Posts, comments, albums, photos, to-dos, and users. And for each one, we've got different get, post, put, and delete methods. So what do you suppose the purpose of each one of these is? Get, post, put, and delete. Some of those should be obvious, and some of them aren't quite so obvious. What's this going to do? If we make a delete method call to this URL, what would you expect that would do? Yeah, which post will it delete? Right, it'll delete with the ID of, not the first one, but the ID 1. What about get posts? What do you think? What's the difference between these? They're both get. Right, so when there's no ID parameter, it's going to retrieve everything. When there is an ID parameter, it's going to get that single object. So what about this? Post and put. What do you suppose those two would do? Right, that's right. So post is used for creating a new resource. And put is used, notice we've got an ID for updating an existing resource. So we'll see this structure for most REST APIs. So we can actually test this using Postman. So here's how we do it. So if we take this URL, this base URL, and copy it, I'm going to throw it into Postman. And I'm going to change my method here to get. So I'm going to run a get request at this API method address, JSON placeholder.tippycode.com/posts. So I'm going to send my request and see what we got back. We got an HTTP 200 response, which means request OK. And look at what we got down at the bottom. Here is all of the post data returned by that API. Right? We didn't put any parameters, so it fetched everything. If we want to fetch one of these, I can just take any ID in the data set and append it on. Again, I get a 200 response, and now I get a single post object. So instead of getting everything, I get just what I'm interested in, just one. What will happen if I execute this request, what do you expect we should get? Look at the URL. What kind of response would you expect to get back? So empty, but even more specific, what does that number mean in terms of HTTP status? Right? So that particular object doesn't exist with that ID. So the API, that method is always going to return one of two things. It's going to return a 200 OK response along with a valid JSON object. Or if that JSON object can't be found, it's going to give me 404. So whatever application is consuming the API, they can display, if this is on a mobile app, we can display not found, right? You ask for something that doesn't exist in service. Okay. Let's go back here. I'm going to go get my 46. So here's what our object looks like. We have a user ID, an ID number, which is obviously auto-generated, and then we have a title and a body. I want to try the post method. What if we want to submit a new post to the API? So I'm going to change get to post, and I'm going to take out the ID. We want to create a new. So in here, I'm going to click on body and make sure that my format is set to JSON. We're going to pass it, create a JSON object, and send it through a post method to the API and see what happens. So I'll pick JSON. So there's 4 keys here, but we don't need to send one of them. We only need to send 3. Which one of these 4 keys can we leave out? Well, we want to create a new one. So we're going to leave one of these out. Which are we going to leave out? No, we want the body. Because we want the user ID. Right. Why are we not going to pass in an ID if we're creating a new one? Where's the ID coming from when we create a new record in a database? Yeah, the database is going to create the ID. So I will say, let's see up here. So our user ID, our title is new post, and our body is using Postman to post the API. I'm setting these up and I want to run a post request. I want to try to submit new data, a new JSON object to the API. So let's see what happens. So notice what we got back. We got a 201 response, which says new resource was created. And it shows us, so what's different about the request and the response? Yeah, the response says, okay, great. You gave us a valid post. We saved it. And here's the new ID for your records if you want to store that in your application, because maybe you want to edit it or delete it later. If I send in something, I'm going to try this. What if I try a post, but I don't send in any title or any body? Let's see what happens, whether it creates a new post anyway, or whether it gives me some kind of other response. Okay. It's schemaless, so there's no rules in the back, so it said, okay. That's fine. I wonder if we create, I put in, let's try something else. Let's see if this will work. Yep, it's okay. So it's schemaless. There's really no validation around what I can send in. So now if I want to look up, it doesn't really save it. I get 4049. So we don't use Postman within an application, but we use it for testing the APIs we want to work with. We can see how they work. What are the URLs and methods we can call? What data do we have to send in? And what data will we get back from the API? So this is a great testing tool we can use if we're going to integrate something like credit card service or shipping service into our app. We can read the documentation and test out that API with a tool like this before we write the code for integrating with our own apps. So you're going to do this more. I'm going to just show you. I'm going to let you get out of here in a minute. I'm going to show you an actual app that a project I was involved in that actually students built. And I'll show you what the app code base looks like and how it interacts with an API on the back end. So the app's actually in the, I'll show you the front end of the app. So here's the front end of the app. It was built with web technologies by students. So it used the Ionic Framework, so basically a JavaScript framework that's cross-platform. So here's what some of the Android versions look like. So the back end for this app is actually a Microsoft. It's a relational Microsoft SQL Server database. But the app itself does not connect to the database. Because not only is there an app front end, there's also a web front end as well. So rather than connecting directly to the database, all of the data calls to fetch all of the data here, this, goes through, where is it? This API. So the front end was built in Ionic of the mobile app, but the back end, we can have a look at the API. So for example, in here we have things like skills. So somebody's using this app, they want to be able to see a list of skills and select what skills they have. So we've got a method here that runs HTTP GET of get skills. It queries the database. Yep. I got 404 when I did get, not post. So this queries the database and then returns the list of skills as a JSON object. And the mobile app then renders that as a list. So we can get a specific skill. This should look familiar. Get skills with an ID. Go and get just this one skill and return it as a JSON object. Here's our put for doing an update. Pass in the updated skill. Modify it in the database and save. Post for creating a new object in the database. And of course, our last one is an HTTP delete. Pass in an ID and go to the database and delete it. So the nice thing about REST API is we can build a REST API in any kind of technology stack, but the structure of it is the same. This is a C#.NET version. But this sort of structure that's laid out here this structure we see everywhere with get, post, put, and delete. We looked at the Spotify API a little earlier, right? That's exactly what we see. So they don't allow us, Spotify doesn't allow us to change data, only get requests. You can read the Spotify data, but they don't let you add to it. See, follow has a put and a delete because we can update who we follow or stop following somebody in the API. So they allow put and delete methods here as well as get. So you'll come back to this, maybe not so much just in your Android course, but particularly next semester, when you're extending the functionality of your apps, you'll be looking at these kinds of APIs, right? How do we write them so we can leverage that kind of functionality and embed it within the apps we're writing? So I know we didn't do a lot. That was a really quick introduction, but it's a starting point because I'm sure it's something you're going to come back to a lot more when you're building your apps, particularly next semester. Okay, so that will wrap up everything for today. So these slides, they are online on that. I'll leave it up so you can download a copy. And